Week 2 in Rhode Island saw our first overtime game of the season and the largest margin being just 12 points. So 3 very competitive games, including my favorite game. Clearly, you guys can imagine where I'm going with this. The Halfway Crooks 2-0 in their last 2 against Lob City. Check it out after having not beaten them in 15 matchups before that. So there's a lot of catching up to do for the Halfway Crooks, but 2-0 is 2-0 in our last 2 matchups. We'll break down that game, the overtime game between the Road Dogs and Load Management, and how the Road Dogs were able to pull that off, as well as how the Air Mambas were able to get their first win here on the Week 2 postgame show. This episode is presented by Ultra Barber Salon in West Warwick, the official barbershop of the Legacy Leagues. That's how I look so good. Aiden's not here. He's probably getting a haircut right now. We talked about it last week. That's why he's not here. He's busy. We'll see how he looks next week, if he looks any different after his haircut. And I'm kidding. He's not getting a haircut. He's busy. But Ultra Barber Salon is where he would be if he was. And we have our other sponsor of the show, along with some other sponsors throughout the season. We have some stuff in the works, and I will tease that. Hopefully we'll get some free samples for some other people. But also DeFusco and Son Fence, another big sponsor of ours. You'll be hearing more from them. But without further ado, let's get to the show. Yeah. This is the Legacy League. Tell me where your legacy be. Yeah. Week 2. It's coming up twos. 2-0 for the Crooks. We talked about it in Week 2 in Rhode Island. Matt and Maya standing by. We'll go in order, which means we'll save the best for last because it was the Halfway Crooks in Lob City at 8 o'clock. But let's start because we know that the show's going to go off the rails. Maya's already on the bandwagon. I gave her the keys. She's driving the Halfway Crooks, fan bus after last week. We got to see where Matt's going to go. I can't remember if he's just, Sweden. He's very impartial. We'll see if he's going to cross over to the dark side with the Halfway Crooks this week. But let's start with that first overtime game in the Road Dogs, able to get the win over Load Management to improve themselves to 2-0. 86-82, the Road Dogs. Load Management falls to 0-2 after 2 very tough games, now playing Lob City and the Road Dogs. And we saw a very different Load Management team from Week 1 to Week 2. So we'll talk about that in a second because they were a little bit in control of this game. I mean, up 5 after 1, up 10 at halftime. And then it kind of flipped and was all Road Dogs. And so, Maya, we'll let you get in first and kind of go a little bit with the Road Dogs. Go wherever you'd like, and we're gonna talk about Load Management and kind of their different look this week and how much more comfortable they looked in Week 2, yet unable to close the door thanks to Noah James's 37, Omar Rahman's 21 before he got hurt, and Demoyenis Q makes his return, 16 points, 12 rebounds, and a lot of vicious dunks. And so, it's funny, they play for the Road Dogs now. Those 3 were on the defending champion Skyhawks last season, so it kind of just picked them up, moved them over, and are doing a lot of the same things for the Road Dogs, Maya. As the Road Dogs get the win in overtime, I can still picture it, and you can go wherever you'd like, but it was Noah James kicking off overtime with that 3-pointer. He falls down. Was it a foul? Was it not? In a 2-minute overtime, I'll say it a ton. If you can score first in overtime, your chances of winning have to increase, right? Just because there's so little possessions in overtime. But what did the Road Dogs do in that second half, Maya, to really, turn this around? Because it was all Load Management until it wasn't, Maya.
I think they're just playmakers just hit shots and started to take over. Noah James with like 37 and Omar before he went down was really strong. And I think just getting on the back of Noah who was able to hit threes, hit floaters, and like you said, throw the lobs to Ennis. He just completely took over the game, especially when Omar went down. And he's the reason they even got to overtime, with the tough left-handed finish with like 2 seconds left. I mean, the Road Dogs are a really good team. Obviously you worry about, now they suffered their second injury, to a real, like one of their best players in Omar, but as of right now, like they're a really good team and they just have playmakers that can hit tough and clutch buckets in all 3 levels. So it was a really good win for them to be able to come back versus a good Load Management team and come out with the dub.
Yeah, and making tough shots for sure. We talked about, Omar going down, and it's funny, even in that scenario, they just kind of threw in Kevin Views, who is an MVP from Massachusetts. It's a player that can take on a bigger role, so it as great as Omar was in this game and in general, for a Road Dogs team to kind of have another player that can kind of fill that role in crunch time and not feeling like you were missing Omar isn't the correct way to say that, but because they have so much depth, they were kind of able to plug and play and still be successful at the end of this game to kind of finish off that comeback. Matt, you've seen the Road Dogs in the past, a new load management team. You can go wherever you'd like because I'm going to get to load management in a second. Leonard Williams with 21-9 looked a lot more comfortable. Malik Chase with 20, Jonathan Batista with 17, and Almar with 15, kind of the familiar face from that team. But they were doing everything right, and they were kind of showing off their athleticism in the first half. They were making more shots than last week, just kind of that being more comfortable I talked about. And then it was the Road Dogs re-snatching the game and, finishing the deal. And, this is one of those either-or games, right? And I like to do that throughout the season where, did you win the game, did you lose the game, or could it have gone either way? And this is a game that definitely could have went either way, and it's that experience and just the Road Dogs making more plays, Matt, that were able to, finish it off.
No, as you mentioned, a lot of changes, kind of a super team thing going there. The Road Dogs basically acquire Omar, Noah, and their bigs from the Skyhawks, and they still have important pieces like Kevin Views, Lyons, Austin, even Shaq Ardrey, who's not there. All guys who can be plus players at any given moment. For me, the key to the game was I actually thought, Dom, especially later on, he's very imposing. He's one of the biggest guys in Legacy Leagues, but he also just has a mean streak to the way he plays. And he was, at that halftime, you sort of load management, some of the best passing I've ever seen, especially in the first part of that game. Guys who can dunk, guys who can shoot. They can do pretty much anything they want out there. But I thought Dom sort of subbing in when Omar went out had a big impact on sort of the flow of that game and gave Noah sort of the opportunity to sort of take over offense. Noah can shoot the lights out. That's how he takes over a game. But in an interesting way, Dom can take over a game just with his presence in the paint and that intensity that he brings and that physical presence.
Yeah, yes to all of that. And I'm going to throw it back to Maya before we move on because Maya did see this load management team in week 1, right, against Lob City, where they fell by 16. And I want to see their shooting numbers really quick from week 1 because, 8 of 26 from 3, right, 30%. So on the lower end of where any team wants to be when they're playing basketball, right? And this week for load management, 15 of 31, so much closer to 50% from 3. And just the feel-wise, it felt like a lot of those came in that first half when things were going their way, right? So we don't have those splits, but it was probably closer to 60% shooting from 3 in the first half. And then when things started to flip, they just started missing shots, and that's going to happen. And how you respond and getting in those situations so then you can work on getting out of them is the key, especially in this league. It's so quick, things can flip so quickly. But Maya, comparing week 1 to week 2, I think it was noticeable right from the jump, like, oh, this team's starting to figure it out. And so what changed, besides making shots, right? When a team loses, they're going to probably miss more shots than when they win, right? So that's kind of the easy surface level type of stuff. But what did you notice, play-wise, player, success-wise? What did you notice from load management changing from week 1 to week 2?
I think it just comes down to having a game under their belt. Making and missing shots, but knowing where each other is. They call out a lot of good stuff during the game, offense and defense. So I think just having a game under their belt kind of helped them offensively of knowing where each other's going to be, and moving the ball around. I thought they moved the ball around really well, and that's what leads to open shots and you being able to make more shots in a game is, you pass the ball, you turn a good shot to a great shot. So they for sure had a good first half, and I think their problem in the second half was the fouling. I think if they would have fouled a little less, they probably would have came out of here with the win. But for sure, they better second game than the first one.
Agreed. And kind of the last point on this game, kind of looking over the stats, when you're making shots, it doesn't matter as much the rebounding margin, and once you start missing, that's something to definitely keep an eye on. And it was 35-25 in favor of the Road Dogs, and the Road Dogs had 16 offensive rebounds to only 11 for load management, right? So if you're missing shots, it's one thing if you can then get those second opportunities and that kind of gets reflected in those offensive rebounds where your shooting percentage might be lower, but if you're getting second chances and more shot attempts were nearly even. 62 field goal attempts for the Road Dogs to 61 for load management, right? So the rebounding then becomes the difference, when you're both shooting kind of the same volume. And it allowed the Road Dogs to get back into it and to be one of the 2 undefeated teams heading into week 3. Let's get to the second game, where the Air Mambas were able to get back on track, and again, another team that kind of made that switch from week 1 to week 2, as they were able to defeat Rags and get back to 1-1. 69-57, the Air Mambas, like I talked about, get their first win. Shaq Colombo 27-10, and is one of the new players for this team, but so many points throughout that first half when they opened up a 24-9 lead after the first quarter. I was like, oh, where the heck was this last week? It's the same guy, and he's like a totally different player. And so shout out to him. Chris Vincenzo at 21 and 13. But the Air Mambas winning by 12, and Rags made a push, so we can kind of talk about that in the second half. We're never able to really get it to single digits, and it kind of always stayed around this 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, point margin. Probably, that's a credit to Rags because they shot 8 of 30 from 3. The Air Mambas get the win shooting 5 of 30 from 3, 16%. So you kind of start to think about that. Like if they make some more, sure, if you make more shots, you score more points. But 5 of 30, you would imagine, isn't going to happen very often. And despite that, the Air Mambas were so able to get the win. For Rags, Richard Hall with 21 and Joe Secatore with 13. And he was 3 of 12 from 3 and had a lot of good looks. And so if some of those go, it kind of changes momentum for this Rags team. And you would expect, Joe Secatore, who we've seen a lot in this league, shoot better than 3 of 12 on way more nights than he's going to shoot 3 of 12. So just one of those nights for him. And the way it's one of those nights is when he's shooting, he's saying while the ball's in the air, nope, right, left, short, like, oh, yep. You can just tell when it leaves your hand sometimes that it's not your night. And you try to fix that in real time, but it's not easy. Matt, you saw the Air Mambas. Well, you saw both of these teams last season. The Air Mambas kind of looked more like they did last season in week 2. They got jumped on early by the halfway crooks in week 1 and really just got beat in transition a lot. And Maya can kind of talk about that flip. But Matt, the Air Mambas in this one, despite not shooting it well, kind of did what happened to them in week 1 to Rags in week 2 with that big lead in the first quarter and never really looked back.
Oh no, this was the game that I was the most excited about. My first game for the season for Rhode Island. Last year, Air Mambas at the beginning of the season in the summer, they were kind of my dark horse that I wanted to see more from and was excited to see. And I'm excited to see that if there was one thing that I'd say that could put them to the next level potentially was getting some size. And Shaq Colombo definitely brings that. I think it's the first time of anyone taking photos of for Legacy Leagues where I had an amazing picture of him passing, playing defense, and shooting and dunking. He can do it all. And he's got some size. There was one picture that I have where it's Shaq and Mr. Ramsey as well playing some pretty hard defense. You got 2 big guys who, if they can insert themselves in that area, they can now offer some really imposing defense in that dimension that I think they were lacking last year. I mean, they got players with offensive potential. Chris DiCenzo, he's a human highlight reel. The other Chris and Mario, they also have shooting abilities too and great offensive potential too. But that was the one thing that I was like, oh, they got some size now. This could be interesting.
Shout out Chris Faig, the other Chris. I love it. That is now his name, so he will love that when he listens. 8 points for him. But yeah, and even last year, Chris and along with Mario, right, were kind of that offensive guard power for the Air Mambas. And for Rags, the second week, because they do fall to 0-2, and it's going to be one of those seasons where every game, there's no easy part of the schedule, right, for a lot of these teams. And so, Maya, that shift that we talked about, right, from week 1 for the Air Mambas to week 2, you can talk about Rags a little too, but what changed, right, for the Air Mambas to get into the win column?
For me, watching the game, I felt like they just moved the ball better, the Air Mambas. Like, if you were to look at the stats from week 1 to week 2, they'll both tell you that They had 14 assists both weeks, but I think this week for sure you could just tell that they moved the ball better and were more unselfish, and passing it to a guy. And I just think that's what helped them get out to a big lead early, their unselfishness. And also what helped them was their defense. I mean, six blocks and 9 steals. I mean, that will win you games and get you out in transition to get easy buckets. And that's where I think the Rags struggled. They didn't get back in defense a lot because they were causing turnovers or getting their shot blocked, and the Air Mambas were able to get out in transition. As far as the Rags, I think it was just as simple as, like I said, not getting back on defense and missing open shots. Like you said, Joe Skeletor was like 3 for 12 from 3, and I thought he had a lot of open threes that he would normally make. So I think that was their main problem, and I think they settled a lot towards the end for some threes. I think they could have got downhill earlier and got to the bucket to maybe help them score more, but they shot 8 of 30 from 3, which if you're not hitting them, then that's how the game gets away from you. So but for the Air Mambas, the difference was passing the ball for me.
And I talked about it last week, and not so much this week yet, but the way these teams and every team changes throughout the season, right? It's week 2, it's their second game. Rags is still trying to figure some stuff out, and you saw in that second half, they played them even in the third quarter, right? And so, if you could do that for 4 quarters, that's how you stay in a game, of course. But, they were able to figure out how they can be effective against a team like the Air Mambas. It was almost, a little too late because by the time the third quarter came, they had to erase a deficit. These teams play again in week 7. And so when we get to that point, 2 calendar months from now, because of our little break for the holidays, I expect it to be a different game, right? It doesn't mean that, Rags is going to win, but I think both teams will be at different points of their kind of progressions throughout the season where it can make for a closer game. And the game was close throughout, but a closer game when they face off again in week 7. Again, I said it. We saved the best for last. We'll let Maya start in a second. But it is the halfway crooks getting the win over Lob City to improve to 2-0. A 2-time finals rematch. Now 2-15 all time. The halfway crooks are against Lob City after a week 2 win, 85-78. And these teams also play again. They will meet again in week 6. It's like I know what I'm doing with some of these rivalries. So I can't wait for the week 6 matchup when both teams have more of their players there, hopefully, because both teams were missing some notable players. But as Lob City knows, and they will tell you, you have to play with who shows up, right? And so both teams were kind of facing some of that. For the halfway crooks, Tyler Siccione, 39, 4 rebounds. We're going to learn how to say his name on this show, that's for sure. 14 of 19 from the floor, 6 of 11 from 3. One of the pictures we posted in the scores graphic stands out because he hits a fadeaway over Nuri, and Nuri's like, uses some select words of like, throwing his hands up and what the hell do I have to do around here to stop this kid, right? And it got to that point, making those tough shots in addition to making, maybe the easier ones that he had. Shout out to him and anytime you score 39, again, especially against Lob City, that's a huge reason you're able to hold off Lob City because they won the fourth quarter by 7, right? So it was a double-digit lead heading into that fourth quarter for the halfway crooks, and I'll, be the witness to this. I was like, pretend the game is tied because we know the run is coming, and right at the start of the third quarter, you started to feel it flip, right? And it was Lob City getting some stops, Cody Crawford getting to the hoop and kind of getting some and ones going, and it was that Lob City momentum that was coming. But it was the halfway crooks able to ultimately hold it off, which is a good sign if you're, rooting for the halfway crooks as I am. Jared Hansen with 18, Aiden Viveros with 12 and 7, a bigger body that you need against Lob City, and Nick Lemoyne with just 10. And so kind of, we saw Nick, and I'll get to Matt in a second, last year win MVP, right? And it was kind of him leading the way. And now he's able to kind of dictate more and almost focus more on defense. And kind of knowing he doesn't have to kind of do everything on offense as well. Notably, David DePina and Aiden Dozos not there for the halfway crooks. As for Lob City, they were missing Victor Cashew Jr., Emmanuel Tutu, and Josh O. Some of their players who have played a lot in past seasons. But it was Taj Eddington, the former halfway crook, doing it to his old team. 24 points, 11 rebounds, 3 of 6 from 3, had some big shots in that fourth quarter as Lob City was, trying to come back. And Elijah Brown, 23 again. We talked about him last week, really getting comfortable in this league. Well, in a big game, 9 of 24, you would have liked it to be better than that, but still 23 points. And Cody Crawford with 23 himself, but just 1 of 10 from 3, and that's not going to happen often. We talk about those players that are really good shooters. Cody's one of them, and 1 of 10, you have to get a little lucky sometimes as a defender for someone like Cody to go 1 of 10 shooting the ball from 3. All right, Maya first. She's got her hand on the steering wheel. The windows are down of the fan bus of the Halfway Crooks. If you're a fan of this team, right, and you talked about them in week 1, they were able to kind of get up early on the Air Mambas. You couldn't write it better for week 2 if you're trying to build on that against a very good team in Lob City. So how did the Halfway Crooks do it, Maya?
Yeah, especially down 2 players who in week 1 really impressed me. So when, I saw that they were down, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Tyler Siccione, it felt like he didn't miss a thing watching. Like, I just felt like every shot he took, he made. And that, his offensive explosion really, just pushed him. They were able to lean on him, and Nick was able to, take a back seat, still shooting efficient. Jarrett helped where he could and hit his free throws. I was really impressed by them, and they took care of the ball. Only 2 turnovers. I think that really helps when you're playing a Lob City team that wins a lot and has a history of winning. You being able to take care of the ball will keep you in games, even if the other team is making a run. So, but all hands to Tyler Siccione for just an incredible game. Just not only from 3, but from the mid-range turnaround he had that you mentioned. It was just everything was falling for him Sunday night.
A very effective game, right? Nearly 74% shooting, 55% from 3. You can't be much more effective than that. And I said it kind of to my team and to Jared before the game, and I said it to Cody after, who Cody was like, that's a good pickup, and kind of knew ahead of time what was possible. Week 1, when you get up like that and everything's going your way, that's one type of game, right? You don't really have to worry about too much. Everything's going your way. Everything's falling. The game goes how you draw it up. Whenever you play Lob City, it's not going to go that way, right? You're going to have to really play, and it's going to be super competitive, high defensive intensity. And so I said to Cody after, I said, I was pumped for Tyler, who's been in big games. I'm not saying, this was like his Super Bowl, but to be in a game like that in the Legacy Leagues against Lob City, just to get a taste of that. Because it's different. It's different than other rec leagues. It's maybe not what you're expecting. And to kind of have that performance in a game like this is just awesome. So it'll be a fun season if he can keep this up, because now that's what it's about, right? This is one game. It's the regular season, and I said this to Lob City as well. We know the regular season means something, but really doesn't until you knock somebody out of the playoffs. And so that's what this is all building towards, is those playoffs and kind of who's going to do it when it really, really matters. But this was a big game for Tyler, big game for the Halfway Crooks and Matt. I teased it in the beginning, but you've seen, Matt, the last 2 were the only 2 wins for the Halfway Crooks against Lob City in the Legacy Leagues ever. 2-15 all time, 0-3 in the playoffs all time. We talked about those back-to-back finals losses for the Halfway Crooks. Lob City's 9-time champions, and a lot of those players still on the Lob City team. They came as close as losing by 1, and I still have the stats from our last podcast last year, right? Losing by 1 in the regular season in summer 2023, losing by 3 in winter 2024. Single-digit games, and finally able to kind of hold off that run, which was coming, Matt, in that fourth quarter from Lob City.
No, and it's interesting that you say that, because just looking at the box score, if you had told me that Nick only took 10 shots, I think there was something a little bit up with him. I don't know what it was, but I felt like that kind of made sense to me just watching him out there. And Aiden, who had 29 points the week before, wasn't there at all. And then Taj, Cody, and Elijah, they all had 20-plus points. I would have assumed Lob City had won. I would have had made that assumption, that just looking at those things, that Lob City probably won. Look, you can feel sort of a certain way about how things go with the referee, It's frustrating. It can be absolutely frustrating for people who really care about, the game. It's something you can't control. And there was one play, I think it was in the fourth quarter. I don't remember who was inbounding the ball, but it was a moment where they were, angry at the refs about stuff that had or hadn't happened, and they literally inbounded the ball right to Jared. Like they literally threw it right to him. And I don't even remember if he scored, but I was like, in my head, I was like, that's the story of the game. That's the story of the game for me, is they let it get to them a little bit more than I think they would have last year. And that was kind of my feeling about the game. I mean, you can't take away from what Siccione did. I mean, it was 39 points, 20 for 30, made every single free throw they forced him to throw. That's hard to go up against, but I do feel like they shot themselves in the foot a little bit.
Well, and I said at the beginning of the year, at best the refs are bad both ways, right? And sometimes they're good, but like at worst case scenario. And so letting that and Lob City also missed shots they might normally make, right? We talked about Cody Crawford shooting, and so a lot of factors, not having their full team, from week one where they did have everybody and they beat a load management team that they kind of knew was going to be athletic. And I forgot to mention this in the first game. Omar was saying to Almar, like, oh, you guys talked about me in your group chat, right? Like doing some of that scouting. You guys mentioned load management and their talking and their, defensive, communication, right? I mean, like, go under that, let him shoot. It's same, for every team, especially a team like Lob City that now knows, all right, we're going to do this next time we play the halfway crooks and see how they respond, right? And they talk about it in football a lot. It's those adjustments, right? And so in week 6, we'll see what types of defensive adjustments, and it's, if Victor Cashew Jr. is there, who's a great defender, I can, that'll shake some things up, right? If he's on Tyler, maybe that changes some things. It shifts everybody else's matchup. It always comes down to matchups. But in this one, the halfway crooks get the win, improve to 2-0. Lob City falls to 1-1, and we will preview the week 3 schedule after a word from our sponsors. And so again, Ultra Barber Salon, the official barbershop of the Legacy Leagues. You're going to want to win MVP. That is the official award this year. So you get some free stuff from Ultra Barber Salon if you're the MVP. So Nick Lemoyne missed out last season as our former MVP, but keep that up for this year, whether it's finals MVP, regular season MVP. You're going to want to be MVP of the league. Let's look ahead to week 3, which we do have a couple weeks off. We're going to play our favorite one-word game as we get out of here. So Maya's a rookie at this. It's okay, and I'll explain it in a second. We're going to do each matchup, okay? You're going to pick a winner, and you get to say one word. It helps us kind of, keep things moving here, but it's also interesting because you don't get to explain it, okay? So your one word is going to explain your pick, right? So defense, then you start cheating and you start hyphenating words, right? I get it. Be creative. Play it right. If you say it fast, it doesn't make it one word, okay? But we'll put Matt on the spot here first, and we'll kind of go over some of these week 3 matchups since we do have some time off. And so week 3 taking place January 4th. So no games until 2026. So by the time you're listening to this, probably about 2 weeks, solid 2 calendar weeks until we're back on the court in Warwick. We're going to kick off 2026 and week 3 with load management versus Rags. So load management and Rags both 0-2 teams. So some team does have to win. There are no ties in the Legacy League. So some team is going to get their first win, Matt. Who do you have winning that game first? Which team?
I have load management winning.
Okay.
And then my one word would be Almar.
Okay. See, that explains it all. So we expect Almar to have a big game. Maya, who do you have winning?
I also have load management getting their first win, and my one word would be desperation.
All right. Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways and a lot of things we talked about with load management, right? So chemistry, shooting, right? If they keep all of those things up, defensive intensity, there could be a hyphenated word. I don't actually play, so I get to ramble and actually explain some of what you guys said, which is great. Let's go to our second matchup, another actual rematch from the semifinals last year where it was the Road Dogs able to win and get to the finals. Road Dogs and Halfway Crooks our battle of 2-0 teams. So perfect timing for some of these matchups. Kind of the teams with the same records are going to be playing in week 3. We'll go Maya first. So your winner and your one word for Halfway Crooks versus the Road Dogs.
I have the Halfway Crooks extending their win streak to 3-0, and my one word will be shot making.
All right, very nice. Little hyphenation, I love it. Yeah, and we talked about it, right? We'll see if Tyler Sicione can keep that up, right, and make some more of those tough shots along with some other faces on both teams. Matt, before I keep going, who's your winner and your one word?
My winner is the Road Dogs, and my one word is Noah.
There you go. All right, and so we'll kind of some of those matchups will be very interesting, right? And so who's guarding Noah James, who's guarding Nick Lemoyne, who shows up, right? How's Omar doing? How's Ethan doing by that point? Who knows where things can be? We'll see. And some former teammates, Aiden Viveros taking on his former team from last season. So we'll see. Kind of he had a good game too against Lob City. Just his presence, right? Being able to protect the rim a little bit against a bigger Lob City team. We'll see how that looks in week 3. The last matchup, a battle of 1-1 teams in week 3. Lob City versus the Air Mambas. They've had some battles in the past. I'm not sure the Air Mambas ever beat them, but God, they came close. I believe it was a calendar year ago, or maybe, no, it might have been, 18 months ago now. They had some free throws in regulation that could have put Lob City away, and gave them the win. They missed them both. The game went to overtime, and Lob City executed and came away with the win. And that was, again, a while ago, but that stands out as one of those games like what could have been, right? And kind of how this conversation may be a little different. New faces on both teams. Matt, who do you have winning, Lob City and the Air Mambas?
I have Lob City, and my one word would be Cody.
All right. Probably not going 1 for 10 again. And then that'll be the last time we bring up what he shot in week 2 because he won't forget. And so we'll probably hear about it again in week 6 when those two teams face off again. Maya, who do you have, Air Mambas and Lob City?
I also have Lob City. My one word would be Elijah.
All right. Yeah, and so, again, not to keep harping on it, 9-24. And so, after a good week 1 from him, another good game in week 2, he shot 11 for 22 in week 1. So kind of more of their, high volume shooter, right? A lot of their offense runs through him, and rightfully so. If he kind of gets to a 60% field goal percentage in one of these games, going 10 for 15, right? Going 12 for 17, a lot more effective. It's going to be harder to stop. That's it. Good job. Everyone followed the rules. No one went rogue today. We got to give Maya a couple weeks, and then she'll be, hyphenating sentences over here during our one-word game. It's fun. It's instead of just making picks and, being able to ramble, which we do in the playoffs. It's fun. Little, put you guys on the spot. And then we'll see who comes up to you guys, too, because you guys had you agreed on 2 of the games. Then that Road Dogs Halfway Crooks matchup, a little different. Good to know Maya didn't abandon the bus, all right? That's all I have to say. She's on now. This is it. So now it's, you can there's a couple chances to get off, but you're kind of stuck, Maya.
Yeah, for sure. I'm all the way on.
All right. I love it. What a time. Halfway Crooks. That's a wrap for the postgame show in 2025. Everybody enjoy the holidays. We'll be back in 2026 when week 3 resumes. Matt and Maya, good job. Keep an eye on the Instagram, the website. We'll have some different types of content throughout our couple weeks off. We do a little look back, and then we really kick off the 10 years of Legacy Leagues when 2026 gets underway, which is crazy. A lot to talk about. And in 2026, I'll tease it, and hopefully I remember. We'll do some trivia. And so I'll leave you with this one. The only player, we'll see if one of you guys can figure this out, kind of looking back at the history of the league. The only player to win 3-point contests in multiple states.
Is it Noah?
No. Maya, do you have a guess?
I don't.
It's me! Come on, this is the best trivia ever. It's me. You guys failed. All right. See you guys in 2026. Thanks for watching.